Hey, my fellow classmate, thank you so much for clicking this video. I am Matthew Msengati, the designer and developer. This is my YouTube channel, Coded Design, where I teach coding and user interface design. If you haven't subscribed, please do me a favor. After you have watched the video and it has added value to you, please consider subscribing. In this video, I want us to talk about 10 masterpieces of web application. As I am becoming a better developer, as I'm trying hard to learn new things from my own teaching and my own content, and also from other developers channel and Stack Overflow and Google, I'm starting to see a certain school of thought or a framework of thinking, and that is to think strategically than technically. Obviously, when we are new into coding, you are bound to look for the technical part of it, like the actual code, the actual syntax, functions, variables, you name them. But as time goes by, as you get a hang of those things, as you start to understand those things, you will be like, then if I understand this much about coding, why can't I build at least not even a big app like Facebook, WhatsApp, or YouTube, but just a decent application for you to use, even for yourself, or at least for your family to use. You will start to feel like something is wrong. You are not winning. You will start to feel like you are missing something, like Neo in the Matrix. You feel like there's something wrong with the world. You feel like you are not necessarily you are empty, but you need something. And in my case, this 10 masterpieces of web application was that thing for me, or is that thing. So let's just jump straight into these 10 masterpieces. These things, these 10 things are just some layers of application. Obviously, when we talk about web application, it has got 3 layers: the front end, the business logic, and the database. In this case, or in this context, when I'm talking about layers, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the MVC, but I'm talking about some layers, whether visible, noticeable, or they are not noticeable. But once you master these things, you will start to be confident in your own coding skill, or in your own understanding of software development, and also you will start to be at least familiar with industry terms, and you will be confident in yourself as to you can go and work for a company as a PHP developer. So without wasting time, these are the things that you must, or these are the things that are involved in the web application, whether it's Facebook, a bank application, or whatever. But these are the things that are there. So knowing them will add some sort of value in your overall understanding. In order to design a scalable and a well-structured application, you must know something about the MVC, which is MVC. It's an architectural design pattern in programming. It helps you with structuring your whole application. It just deals with the separation of concern. It suggests that you must have models, function, and classes that deals with connecting to the database only. You must have views. Views, it's more like the presentation or objects that are responsible for displaying something on the screen. In terms of the web technology or the web industry, those are it's your HTML. And then you must have the controllers, which is PHP scripts and functions and classes that deals with processing the information or the input that is coming from the views. This is a well-known architecture. It works for big companies, and for small guys or self-taught guys like us, it makes your life easier, and also it changes how you think about software development, and also how to write a better and a clean code. Okay. Obviously, the MVC, M is for database, and concerned with the database, and the view about what you see, and the controllers about the business logic and processing that information. Then going forward, we've got a database layer. When I'm talking about the database layer, I'm not talking about it in terms of the MVC. Remember, MVC doesn't tell you what to put in a model. It doesn't tell you. You can connect to an SQL database or you can connect to a different database. It doesn't matter. When we talk of the view, in case of the web development, the view might be the HTML, but in terms of mobile development, the view might not be HTML. Maybe let's say it might be XML or whatever. So whatever the case may be, the MVC doesn't dictate on what you must put there, but it gives you a structure. So when I'm talking about the database layer on number 2, I'm not necessarily referring to the database layer as a model, but I'm referring to it as the content inside the model. So meaning that now that you know that there must be a model, a class that deals with connecting to the database, this point number 2 is the actual database itself. So as you are learning programming, number 1, make sure that you understand the MVC. Number 2, make sure that you are familiar with connecting to the database and also creating a database, like on the back end, like creating tables, and also the OOAD might help object-oriented analysis and design to be able to look at the problem. Or if you don't have some sort of a problem at hand, you can look at Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram and try to create like some tables from what you see. It's more like you are reverse engineering. That will help you to understand the database. So as you are learning, me and you, we are both learning or we are trying to become better developers. It's very important to understand the database layer, the content of it. How do you connect in terms of PHP, PDO, and what is the advantage of using PDO and all those things. You need to be familiar with those things so that you can build at least a product, because the more you learn the syntax, the more you are going to become a coder, and you are going to ask yourself, why can't I develop a system, an application, a product, something that maybe in the future I might sell it or become the next billionaire like other guys are doing. Leave home and stay in United States or wherever, or in Silicon Valley, and become one of the tech giants. You never know, anything is possible. Sorry. So let's go to number 3. Number 3 talks about the presentation. The presentation is associated with the views. However, even in the presentation, I'm not talking about views as an architecture, but I'm talking about the content, what goes inside the views. That will mean that you must know a thing or two about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and also not in terms of, if I can be honest, not in terms of the code, but in terms of how these things interact together. How can you write a clean code? How can you write, for instance, how can you write functions in JavaScript that will help you to make it easier for you to manipulate the DOM? How can you write object-oriented JavaScript? How does CSS and JavaScript connect, and also the HTML? So that's what I mean. Like here, I'm like some sort of pushing you to think strategically. For instance, let's talk about object-oriented programming. As I'm getting into understand object-oriented programming, I'm starting to see that when I'm jumping to a new language, it's just a matter of understanding how this language instantiate classes, what is its syntax for creating like classes, declaring classes, how the inheritance work, how can I apply polymorphism. As soon as I get that, then to me it always seems like I'm like 80% there in that language. So that is because it's thinking on a higher level, thinking strategically, meaning that thinking about coding but on a higher level, getting to be concerned about things that matters in a level that is higher than coding. So when I'm talking about presentation, I'm not talking about the actual coding, but how these pieces fit together. Then also, please bear with me, the terminology here might not be that proper. For instance, I'm going to talk about helpers. Maybe you are used to helper classes in an MVC framework as something different or whatever. Please, these terms are just, I came up with these terms just for the sake of explaining. Let me just make sure that we are recording. Okay. So helpers, in the entire application, you've got, for instance, your MVC that helps you with structuring your program, and then obviously you've got these two, the database layer and the president. Helpers are some sort of functions that are there to help the application with the resources that it needs. For instance, let's say a function that will validate the input, and you'll find out that in the architecture that you have, it doesn't really have a place where it fits. Like, it doesn't fit under a certain class, so you can just put it in a file, in a PHP file, and it's going to be a helper. So that's what I mean when I'm saying a helper. Or it can be constants. For instance, directories, a root directory won't change. Like, it's something that will be declared once and it won't change through the entire application. So you can put that variable or declare that variable under a file called helpers, where you have everything. It's more like some sort, not necessarily the configuration of the application, but it's like those things that as soon as you take them and shove them under certain functions where they don't belong, they will start to stress you or make your life miserable, because tomorrow you will want to make some updates and you will be like, where is this function that validates the input? Because you've taken it and you've shoved it under the invoice class, of which in your mind you know that the invoice class is concerned about invoices, it's not concerned about validating input. So it will complicate your life, and also it won't make your code cleaner. So helpers are just, it's just everything that you might need, that your system might need to some sort of take in order for it to function properly. And then we've got actions. Also actions, they are more like helpers, but helpers are more like, let's say, variables in a way, like things that you are just going to store, raw data that can be consumed by your application. But when I'm talking about action, I'm talking about some sort of tasks to be performed. And also these tasks to be performed, remember, they don't fit somewhere here. Also, the other skill that you must learn is to, as I'm saying, that these are masterpieces. It's not only important to know the syntax and to build a program or an application, but to understand all those pieces and how they fit in. For instance, you might have a beautiful house, a well-structured house, and some other people don't have, and you are the only one who have it, maybe in your area and whatever. That's not a problem. That's wonderful. God bless you. But now, if you have a tendency of being like disorganized, then you are not going to live a fulfilling life, because your wife will come and ask you, where is the car? And you said, okay, the car is somewhere, you don't know where it is. And also when you find the car, she will ask you, where is the car key? I have to go to work, and you don't know where the car keys are, and then it becomes a problem. So do you see that even if you can have everything set working together, but you need to know your assets and where they stay, because by misplacing whatever, even in real life and in code, then that might render your code useless. So when I'm talking about actions, I'm talking about tasks that are more like structurally attached or inclined than the problem domain. What do I mean by that? Let's say I'm asked to develop WhatsApp. Validating an input doesn't necessarily relate to the actual WhatsApp thing, because WhatsApp, the main thing about WhatsApp, it's chatting, like it's sending messages. That's the core, that's the domain problem. So validating inputs and routing and what can I say, security or some other functions, they don't really relate to the problem domain. And if you are not clear about that, you might find out that before you start an application, you will spend 90% of your time dealing with framework related things than solving the actual problem. Say that I'm supposed to create my own YouTube or a watered down version or a competitor of Spotify. First of all, I need to have a server, I need to have a database, I need to have the MVC framework, things need to work and whatever. So you can see that there is some sort of an admin that you have to do. So if you don't have clarity of these pieces and where they fit in, Whenever you are executing a code or a project for a client that has got a deadline, you might miss the deadline because it's time consuming to build an application structure. And also, as Uncle Bob once said, that the majority or the major part of software development, it's managing dependencies. Obviously, even if here we are not really managing dependencies, but the idea of being organized and know what fits where comes as a bonus. So you must have a file, maybe a file called action, that have got all the pieces of code that quickly helps you to execute something. More especially, it's not related to the problem domain, and also it's not architectural. It doesn't fall part of the MVC. It's not in the database, it's not in the views, but it's more of a structural function that perform a certain task. Things like, for instance, the perfect example might be sessions, managing session. If I'm creating an application, WhatsApp is an application, managing session has got nothing to do with the actual code, the domain problem, which is to chat, send a message to one person to another, and connecting people or whatever. You'll find out that making a session, you can just put that function under actions, then you will call it whenever you want to. And then in journey, I'm on number 6. You must know a thing or two about security. You must know about security. Security, it's not a function. Security is not sanitizing input. Security is not validating input or preventing hackers from accessing your database, but it's just a certain way of thinking and planning. So if you are aware that your site has to be secured, it will affect how you structure your own views and how you structure your own views and how you structure your controllers and how you structure your model. So I cannot pinpoint and say that security is creating this function or declaring this variable, but it's more like it's something that you must study and search on the internet and find out what is like web security. How do people hack the websites? And then from then you'll get that knowledge and try to prevent that. And remember, preventing it is not like writing certain functions. It's not that easy, but it's a frame of thinking. It's a certain mindset whereby your code has been written in such a way that it's it's bulletproof. By structuring it, by cleaning it, by refactoring, you make sure that it's bulletproof. Okay. And then number 7, it's access, but it's just one word there. It's access control. The idea of for instance, when you are busy writing code for logging in and logging out, obviously that's not a problem domain. Why am I saying that's not a problem domain? Because every web application, you have to log in and log out. It's access control. It's something that is already there. So knowing what it is and how to approach it and how to go about it, it's very important. So maybe, for instance, if we have given a project, you can start with the things that are in the problem domain and be concerned about those things, because in terms of the structure and other things, you know very well where does this piece of the 10 masterpieces fits in and what it does. So when I'm talking about access, I'm talking about the access control. Any application, you must restrict people. You can't expose the information to anyone. You must have a certain way of controlling who accesses the system and accessing which files and which information, and that is. And then the other important thing that you must know is routing. If the MVC pattern doesn't really dictate on how you apply it, but it just it's more of a structural technique. Routing, it's like, how do you move from this layer to this layer, from this layer to this layer? I can say it's an information flow. That's routing, for instance. And whenever you hit the website www.codeddesign.co.za, that's a request and it's a get request. So when the index page or the index PHP, which is the entry point of your script, receives that, it will see that there are no what can I say there are no, for now let me just say, there are no argument passed, or there's no query string. Yes, there's no query string. So this request necessarily needs to go to a login page. It doesn't really ask for anything. It's the first time. Then that is routing. So the router or the router class needs to decide what to do with a certain type of request. It's like it's matching the incoming request to the resources of the application. If maybe the request is this and it's there's no query string, then you must be channeled to home page or you must be channeled to login. If maybe the session is already started and you are already logged in, then you must be channeled to this direction. So that's what routing does. And then we are going to get into design patterns. Design patterns are just certain tools for thinking. It's like what's this thing? It's like professional developers or experienced developers worked on object-oriented programming for some time until they notice some common problems in the application development industry, and then they identify those problems and they came up with solution as design patterns. So this is something that you must learn about, and you must also apply it uh, in your application or in your coding or in your development. Obviously you cannot just apply all the design pattern at once. You must learn them one by one and see how you integrate them, because if you do so, then it will mean that if you can be hired by a certain company, obviously they must be aware of these design patterns, so the communication might be easy and you are going to easily understand things. For instance, when maybe as a team you are discussing, okay, what would be the approach, then maybe the other developer might come and say, let's use a state pattern. So if you are aware of the design pattern, you will have a picture of what's going on, even though the implementation involves a lot of things that needs to be done. But in terms of communicating, you'll understand that what they are trying to say, and you can go ahead and create the state machine for them because you know the design pattern. And lastly, also that doesn't mean that it's the, like what's then say, the least important. Is the solid principles. Even the solid principle is not like creating a function and say that this function is called solid principle, but it's a certain frame of thinking. It's a certain approach of doing things to make sure that your class is solid. S stands for single responsibility in this solid, and O is for open close principle, and L is for Liskov substitution, and I is for inversion of control, and D it's for okay, so let me just check. L is for Liskov substitution, and I it's for inversion of control, but D is for dependency inversion. Oh, I is for interface segregation. I is for interface segregation. So you must know these things, the solid principle, and also you must apply them, because they will help you to write a clean code, to write a quality code. The software development industry, if I can be honest with you, doesn't really need coders. It really doesn't need coders, but it needs problem solvers. It needs outside the box thinkers. It needs people who can identify a problem and find means of solving it. That's why in any job, even without in software development industry, the people who are highly paid are those people who think strategically, who think like on a higher level of thinking, like who set directions, like the CEOs. Like they have to look at the overall company, look at the departments, and they have to some sort of lead the entire company in terms of what needs to be done and how it's going to be done, and also delegating. So once you get into a work environment in programming, you will find out that it's more like project management for the most part, because it's a lot of people, it's a lot of things that needs to be done, and some of the people, they are not even in the building, they are not in the office. Maybe they are working from a different part of the world. For instance, it's possible that a company might outsource all the user interface design to another company or a certain freelancer sitting somewhere or whatever. So the other guys will just receive those files and they will work on them. It's also possible even on the actual application, you'll find out some other classes are designed are being programmed in India and some in South Africa and some, as long as there is that mastermind person, the person that thinks strategically to make sure that he facilitates the communication and the interaction and how all of these pieces fits in together. Otherwise, I'm Matthew Msengati, the designer and developer. These were the 10 masterpieces of web application. So these might help you to position you for employment, because once you familiarize with yourself with these terms, number one, you can be able to present yourself as a developer, even if you are self-taught, yes, but you can be able, using these 10 masterpieces, to say that this is what I know in terms of the web application and development. This is what I know and this is how I do it. Otherwise, for me, Matthew Msengati, thank you so much for clicking this video. See you on the next one.